Hi, welcome to HitEnter. I'm absolutely thrilled to have one of the most familiar Dutch venture capitalists on the show. Hailing from Peak Capital, Thijs Gitmans is currently the fund manager of the second Mainport Innovation Fund that recently launched. In this show, Thijs talks about the investment focus of the fund on logistics, aviation and transportation startups, what the limited partners like Delft University of Technology, Port of Amsterdam and KLM Airlines bring to the table, and how we can tackle the issue of talent now the Dutch startup ecosystem is heating up. Hi Thijs, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thijs, you are now the fund manager of the Mainport Innovation Fund, which recently launched, the second fund actually. Yeah. Can you tell us a bit more about the fund?
Yeah, it's actually a follow-up fund from Mainport Innovation Fund I. We focus on innovation in logistics, transport and aviation. The first fund mainly focused on aviation. We broadened our scope also because we have two new partners that have entered the fund. It's KLM, Schiphol, TU Delft, they were in the first fund as well. And Havenbedrijf Amsterdam, Port of Amsterdam, they joined, as well as Dutch Railways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And why did you expand the globe? Is that because of the new partners, or is there another reason?
Actually it's sort of a natural evolvement of the fund. First of all, there was interest from partners outside the aviation space. Mm-hmm. Port of Amsterdam and Dutch Railways, but also other partners. And also, if we looked at the interesting opportunities we saw compared to the focus of the fund, it also justified to broaden the scope a little bit. Just to give you an example.
The previous fund was too narrow, in your opinion.
The thing is, one of the important themes in our fund is, for instance, seamless travel. Mm-hmm. That doesn't stop at an airport. Of course. So it made sense to also in business sense to widen its scope.
Mm-hmm. This is the second Mainport Innovation Fund. Can you tell us how the previous one performed?
Yeah, sure. The previous one, it closed on September 30, the day before we launched the second one. Mm-hmm. We have had an investment period of 5 years, so we're now going to move towards the exit period of the fund. We expect maybe one or two of the companies in the first fund to maybe go towards an exit in 1 or 2 years. Mm-hmm. There's, let's say, various companies that do quite well.
Can you name a few of
them? Yeah, you probably know. The latest investment was Undergrid. Mm-hmm. They have Schiphol as one of their customers, and they are now doing a pilot at the Port of Amsterdam. And you also see that as soon as customers start to understand what they can do with a product like Undergrid, which is an Internet of Things startup, that can be quite complex. You see customers starting to move towards the company, so now they are talking to international airports as well for international rollout through the Schiphol network. And one of the companies that are also doing very well is multi-pilot simulations. They've built a low-cost flight simulator, which attracts a lot of interest also from the low-cost carriers, because what is a full flight simulators are extremely expensive, so very few airlines can afford them. Yes. So we see that take up as well, and there's a few more that are doing quite well. So we have a positive outlook for the fund so far.
Yeah, and the focus of the new fund is especially helping startups to expand globally. So what does that mean? In which stage are you going to invest?
We can do a few things for a startup through our fund. I think I maybe should tell you a bit more about how that works, how we operate on a daily basis. We have a fund management team from within NBI Investors. That's the fund manager, and we manage several funds. And NBI Investors has managed Mainport 1 and is now managing Mainport 2. So we have a team from NBI Investors, but that's complemented by people from our partners. So each of our partners, we have 5 partners, they dedicate 2 people to the fund. So in total 2.5 full-time employee, so that sort of doubles my team. Mm-hmm. And in a practical manner that operates, that we every 3 weeks we sit together, let's say with what we call the fund committee. Yes. So that's the fund manager with the 10 people from the partners, And they are all specialists from, let's say, on innovation. For instance, an innovation manager from KLM, business development guy from Dutch Railways.
Yes.
We sit together, we watch.
Those are the partners, Dutch Railways, KLM Airlines, Schiphol Group, and the
TU Delft and Port of Amsterdam. Yeah. So we sit together, we look at the new deals that have come in, and I think one of the very strong points of the fund is that through that fund committee we can directly validate whether a new business plan that we receive, whether there's a commercial opportunity for that or not. So we can validate directly with, let's say, the business partners. And the validation comes from where? Because to be honest, most corporations are not that famous for being very... No, you're right, you're right. And I think, honestly, I come from a different fund. We could talk about that later, perhaps. Yes. But that was, of course, one of the main questions I had. How is this going to operate in practice? Exactly, because every investor wants to do something extra for their portfolio companies, and so do we. But then we are working together with large corporates and a university. So how can we make that work in practice? How does that work in practice? The thing is, today you no longer have to talk about whether innovation is, let's say, required for large corporations or not. I mean, everybody's convinced that the only way to survive and to grow, innovate or die, is exactly that's it. Yeah. So that discussion has passed. Then the second question is, how are we going to do that? And you see that companies like KLM, Schiphol, and the other partners, they all have a team of an innovation team in place with 1 or 2 innovation managers, business developers, and what they do is they walk around all day to see what is the latest thing in their business line, in their line of business. Yes. And for me, that's a very important source of deal flow, for instance. Yes. So very often, the guys at KLM, they see an innovation or a new startup even sooner than I do, although we have our eyes open for that all the time as well. Yes. So that's one thing. They spot the innovations together with us. Or actually maybe more the market opportunity, or where there is a pain point in It's both of them actually, because then as soon as we have identified a new opportunity, we discussed that in that fund committee that I talked about, and the people in let's say in the innovation managers, they know very well where the pain points are. Yes. And it's not that we're going to improve an airplane. I mean, that's beyond the scope of our fund. That's beyond the scope of a lot of investors and a lot of people. But the thing is, solutions surrounding the core business of one of our partners, that's what we're looking for. How can we make the passenger experience more seamless? How can we improve safety? How can we, for instance, create track and trace solutions in the Amsterdam harbor? Those are the kind of pain points that are very clear to our partners. Yes. And that's how we try to spot the startups. So you just said that your limited partners, they enable you to validate solutions, so they really know what the pain points are, and they actually apparently need the speed of startups. Is that a correct observation? It's a very, let me give you an example of how that could work, or how that has worked in practice. One of the investments one of the latest investments that the first fund has made is in a company called Snowcom. Snowcom, it's a company that's run by a very young guy, engineer, and he invented a way to dispose of snow at airports, for instance. And what his solution does, he has developed a machine that sucks up the snow, compresses it, deposits it in a truck, and then it gets moved away. Sounds like a very obvious solution. Today, that happens in the... Not for a traveler. A traveler doesn't know that it's a the problem. Thing is, I didn't realize how unique the solution was until I read the response by Schiphol. Because today, all these solutions are that the snow is being shoved to the side, and then it sort of creates walls next to the gates. Exactly. And the walls block the trolleys and trucks and everything that has to move there from moving around. So it's a very big pain apparently for airports, especially if you're in the US or Canada or what have you. But looking at that from a investor's perspective, why would you invest in a very young guy who has just only on paper invented this machine? So what do? We talked to one of our partners, we talked to Schiphol, and Schiphol said, well, if this guy develops this machine and it works, we need to have one as soon as possible.
Yes.
So normally as an investor I might have put that plan aside. Now I could validate it with Schiphol, and the guy, I talked to him last week, he has interest from all over the world. I mean, from every country where they have like major issues with snowfall on airports, they need to have that machine.
Yes.
So he's being called a game changer by one of the major competitors in this space. So that's how validation for me really can work.
So that's the validation that the limited partners bring to the table. So what's your role then as a VC? Because you were previously a VC at Peak Capital, and now you're the fund manager of the Mainport Innovation Fund.
Yeah.
So what's your role in the?
I think that's at where the basis of how our let's say version of corporate venturing can work. There's very different ways of, I mean, corporate venturing is like a big statement, but you can do it in very different ways. Companies can try to innovate themselves, can try to create startups within their own walls. They can invest into startups directly. But I think one of the main issues is that the characteristics of a startup and a corporate are very different. And if you start looking at corporate venturing, like innovation by corporates, but through some sort of a platform, the way we have designed the fund is one of the better ways to do it. There's various ways. It's
better because it's independent?
The thing is, we are an investment fund, so first of all we need to do our job as fund managers very well. So, and a lot of time is being spent on selection of finding startups, of startups finding you, selecting the right teams, negotiating the right terms with them, and then try to help them.
Exactly.
Fund manager, or let's say being an investor, is sort of a skill in itself, and it's definitely not a skill that's very well sort of embedded in most of the corporates.
Yes.
That's one thing. The other thing is, if corporates get too close to the startups, it may sort of hinder both of them. I think the worlds are getting closer together, and they should, because they can learn a lot from each other. But having a corporate trying to run a startup himself, or within its own walls, I think then you sort of take the energy and the innovation and the way of sort of borderless thinking that a lot of startups have. You take that away from them.
And that's how you just said that both startups and corporates can hinder themselves if they get too close to each other.
Yeah.
Is that one of the ways that creates a problem?
Yeah, that's what we try to solve as a fund. At least we try to do the fund management or the investment part right. We are an independent fund manager, so that's also important also for the startups we talk to. Hey, you don't want to, if you get an investor that's too closely linked to your business, a strategic investor, that also may hinder the future of your company. Like if KLM would invest directly in one of the companies, it may be more difficult for that company to, let's say, do business with one of KLM's competitors.
Exactly.
And now that we have like...
That's an issue I've heard a lot of times.
Yeah, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense. I mean, it's I think fairly common knowledge, at least for most investors, that a strategic investor can create a lot of value for a company, but in the end it will make it more difficult to do business with the competitors of that company. So,
yes. So whose decision was this to attract independent VC firm to run this fund?
I think the origin of the fund was in 2008 or 7 or 8. It was actually TU Delft and KLM who at some point sat together, they met each other, and they were talking about innovation and corporate venturing and what would be the best way to deal with that. And looking at the various options, their conclusion was that the best way to do it would be to set up a fund which you put at some distance from the operations of TU Delft, Delft University themselves, and KLM.
KLM, yeah.
And then they started thinking about what would be the best way to set that up. They asked Schiphol to join at that point, and then at that point they started looking for someone who could manage an investment fund.
Yes.
At that time they ended up at Rabobank, which also was partner in the first fund. And the Rabobank had a fund management organization, and they initially managed the fund.
Yes.
But
the Rabobank is just a bank; they are not venture capitalists.
Yeah, but a lot of the banks, and may or may not be a surprise, but a lot of the banks had venture capital teams, venture capital private equity teams that actually run different kinds of venture capital and private equity funds.
Yes.
Well, maybe not surprisingly, that has decreased over the past years. And one of the results of that was that NBI Investors, what is NBI Investors today, was spun out of the Rabobank 1 year ago. Okay. So we became an independent fund manager, apart from the companies, apart from Rabobank, I must say. Well, that's also when we decided to set up the second Mainport fund. Yeah. But to briefly answer, to come back to your question, it was the initiative of the partners themselves to set up the fund. Yes. And then they found a manager, which is now us.
Yes. What can your portfolio companies, the startups you invest in, expect from the limited partners, from KLM, from Delft University of Technology, and all the other partners?
But we talked about the validation already, so that's an important aspect. But the other thing is, if we can, we would, one of the partners could operate as launching customer. We have, Undergrid is working at Schiphol. There's Robin Radar, which is also one of the investments of the first fund, has one radar set up at Schiphol. KLM is working with MI Airline. They have sort of a closed Wi-Fi network for the passengers and the crew inside an airplane. So they're very willing to sort of try new solutions if they come up. Of course, if you want to become a customer, you need to sell the product to the right people within that organization. Yes. So there's no sort of obligation for KLM to do business with one of the companies.
So but if your point is they really have to sell, so it's not.
Yeah, like, but we can help them talk to the right people directly. Exactly. So they don't have to knock on the front door. We can help them get to the right floor within the company and talk to the right people directly. Once they're there, they have to sell it themselves.
Exactly. And your fund is focusing on aviation, logistics, and transport. Why that specific focus?
Yeah, it's sort of a natural process coming from the first fund. That's one thing. As we discussed previously, transport or aviation, it doesn't stop at an airport, or it doesn't stop at a harbor, or there's a very close connection, and the challenges they have are very similar. Yes. We talked about safety, we talked about track and trace solutions, we talked about seamless travel for passengers.
But from a VC, from a venture capitalist perspective, you want to know if there is still an opportunity in those areas, so they can be they can be opportunities or real pain points, but maybe the technology is not ready or whatever reason. But
I think
the question is especially from the perspective of the VC.
Yeah. Well, you were mentioning one thing. Maybe technology is not ready for them yet, or they are not ready for technology. I think that's where the opportunity is. If you would go outside and ask people, name a few innovative, let's say, businesses, they would not come up with logistics or transport. Yes. That means for me as an investor, there's a huge opportunity there. And I think if you look
You want to be ahead of the game.
Well, we can. With the fund that we have and the partners that we have and the funds that we have available, we have about an 18 million euro fund. I think there's a lot we can do in a business that's still in the early days of innovation. So,
yes. And is it also a reason that the Netherlands, actually the Dutch, are quite ahead in those fields of aviation? I don't know, but transport and logistics, they're quite innovative.
Yeah, let's say our fund is called Mainport Innovation Fund. I mean, the Mainport function of the Netherlands is a very important one. We have very strong partners historically in that field. So I think it's a very our country and the hub that our country is for logistics and transportation makes it a great place for innovation in our focus area.
And also as a test bed, probably.
Yes, well, that's you come back to our partners again, but yes. definitely I think that we are very well positioned for that. Yeah.
You just talked, or you gave Undergrid as an example of an Internet of Things startup. Internet of Things is quite a buzzword for the last 10-15 years. Do you think we are at an inflection point with regard to the Internet of Things?
The issue I have with, let's say, statements like Internet of Things and big data, it's
exactly.
Everybody sort of thinks to understand what it's about, but for me it only becomes relevant when once you have built a solution on top of that. I mean, we can connect everything to the internet that we want, but then it creates. What do we do with the data that we get out of it? Mm-hmm. What do we do with the sort of opportunities that it creates for us? I mean, we can track and trace luggage cards at Schiphol, but if you don't do anything with the information that you get from it, it's no use. So you need to build a business model on top of, let's say, the technology that you develop in order for it to be feasible.
It's more about the use cases than the technology.
I think in the end the customers only care about what the use case is, and I only care about what the customer does with it. So if the technology is beautiful but there's no use case and there's no customer that's interested in paying for that solution, then for me it doesn't really make sense for me as an investor.
Yes, and you're an investor for quite some time right now. You were previously an investor at Peak Capital. So what made you decide to switch to become the fund manager of Mainport Innovation Fund?
Yeah, there's a few things. Peak has also set up a third fund, as you probably know. There were a few things I liked about the Mainport Innovation Fund. It's a bit larger fund, but more importantly, I'm part of a larger team. We manage 4 funds altogether, 2 of which are Mainport funds. So we have a bit more body in the team, and we get to share resources, get to share knowledge. Challenges for investors to a large extent are very similar. Very often involve the team, very often involve slower acceleration than we would have expected. So we can learn a lot from each other. We are 8 people in our office on a daily basis. So that's one important thing. One thing I really look closely at is how are we going to add value? Well, we talked about that a long time. I strongly believe in the way that we have organized the value add through our partners combined with the fund management.
Yes.
So that's another thing. And even though I had a great time at Peak Capital, I like the focus. It's something different for a change.
Yes.
So it's not something that I like the broad software focus that Peak has, but I also really like that we are really focusing on the logistics, transport, and aviation business right now. Also, well, enables me to become sort of an expert in certain fields, like on the Internet of Things applications.
Yeah. And one more question, important question, I think about the fund. What's the sweet spot of your investment? So, what's the deal size of
what we do, and
which stages do you invest?
We typically invest early stage. So, like most of the I think VCs that are comparable in size, we do typically 200K to 1 million initially for the first round. Sweet spot is 500K. We can go up to 2-3 million for subsequent rounds. Yes. We are we use the seed facility from the Dutch government, but we also have the opportunity to do something outside of that. We have reserved some funds for that as well. There's one thing I would like to add. What we can do and will do, we also have done it in the first fund. We do dare to invest pre-revenue. Snowcom is a good example, for instance. If we get strong validation by our partners, for us, we dare to sort of invest before the product is on the market. So
yes. To your point about investing pre-revenue, is that also at the stage of 2-3 million, or is that a Series A investment and you really want to see some traction in revenue?
It depends. I think if we do, I think I see 3 phases. One is pre-revenue. We do a small ticket based on a validation by one of our partners. Our sweet spot is early stage, like 200K to 1 million. Then we would like to see some turnover.
Yes.
We could do like 1 million and up deals for the first round, but that would be very limited. I think we could do 1 or 2, probably do that together with another investor. But then we sort of spread between the three phases, but let's say our core is in the early stage.
Yes. You have been an investor for quite some time. I don't know how many years, but for long enough, I think. And the Dutch startup ecosystem is heating up. More and more startups are getting funded, and more and more capital is raised by VCs. One of the issues is what we will be confronted with is the lack of talent. How do you think we can cope with that problem?
It is a very good question, because we've seen a lot of new funds entering the market, including ourselves. A lot of money drives up valuations. That in itself should not be the problem. But getting talent and getting good entrepreneurs to the market in the same speed, that's very difficult.
Yes.
And I think that really that's really a long-term sort of trajectory that we already have entered. I mean, you see in education, there's a lot of things happening. Nelly Kroes is spending a lot of time on how to learn people to code at a young age. I think one of the things that, but we would like to see results quicker than that, right? We would like to see...
Yes, I know, as a matter of fact, there are quite some startups that raised quite large rounds, and they need a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah.
So they're struggling with that right now.
Yeah, I think the attitude towards entrepreneurship really has changed. So people that come from university today seriously consider entering a startup, starting a startup for themselves, or joining other founders. So I think that's a very big difference compared to like 10 years ago. I think we have to attract talent from outside, somewhere or another. You cannot, like as I say, you cannot bake successful entrepreneurs, right? So some part of it has to come from outside. And the other thing I think is we would like to have young people, or people during their university years, to see what you can do, what happens within a startup, and what entrepreneurship really is, and what risk-taking really is. And I think those kind of steps, they're all small steps, but we have to take a lot of them to get more talented people to choose sort of a career in this direction, instead of joining large banks or corporates.
Yes. Thijs, it was a pleasure to have you here with us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, myself.